Full Band Barrage Jamming, Chinese version. Chapter 1. The Tonggu Front.
In choosing a form of battlefield electromagnetic jamming, this manual recommends targeted jamming against a specific frequency or channel, and does not recommend barrage jamming across a broad band because the latter also affects friendly electromagnetic communications and electronic support measures.
From the 1993 United States Army Electronic Warfare Manual, January 5, Tonggu Front. The sea could no longer be seen. In one night, the line had fallen back 15 kilometers.
In the light, before dawn, the snowfield showed a cold, dark blue. In every direction far away, struck targets sent up black pillars of smoke. There was almost no wind, and the columns rose straight into the high sky, like long black gauze threads joining heaven and earth. Following those columns upward, Lin Yun was startled. The sky, just beginning to show dawn, was packed with a huge mass of white tangled fiber, as if a mad giant had slashed the heavens with frantic strokes. They were the mingled contrails of fighters, left by a night-long battle between the Chinese and NATO air forces for control of the sky.
Precision strikes from the air, and the sea had also lasted all night. To a layperson, the attacks might not have seemed dense. Explosions came every few seconds, sometimes every few minutes. But Lin Yun knew that each explosion meant an important target had been hit, almost never a miss. Those detonations were like bright punctuation marks in last night's black essay. When dawn came, Lin Yun did not know how much strength remained in the defensive line, or even whether the line still existed.
The electronic countermeasures platoon Lin Yun belonged to had been destroyed at midnight, when 6 laser-guided bombs fell on its position. Lin Yun had escaped by chance. The Type 86 armored vehicle carrying the jammer was still burning, and the other electronic warfare vehicles of the platoon had become heaps of black metal scattered across the snow. The residual heat in the crater where she lay was fading, and she felt the cold. She pushed herself upright with her hands. Her right hand touched a sticky, cold, soft lump, like a clod of mud caked with black bomb ash. She suddenly realized it was a piece of flesh. She did not know what part of a body it came from, much less whose body.
In that fatal strike last night, 1 lieutenant, 2 second lieutenants, and 8 soldiers had been killed. Lin Yun began to vomit, but nothing came up except sour fluid. She rubbed her hands desperately in the snow, trying to wipe away the blood. But in the cold, the dark red stains quickly congealed on her hands and remained horribly clear.
A suffocating, dead silence had lasted for half an hour. That meant a new ground attack was about to begin. Lin Yun turned up the volume on the walkie-talkie clipped to her left shoulder, but it gave only a hiss of static. Suddenly, several blurred words came through, like a few birds drifting through thick fog.
Observation Post 06 reports. In front of Position 1437, 37 M1A2 tanks, average interval 60 meters, 41 Bradley troop carriers, 500 meters behind the lead M1A2 assault element. 24 M1A2s and 8 Leclercs are outflanking position 1633. Have crossed the junction with 1437, positions 1437, 1633, 1752, prepare to engage.
Lin Yun suppressed the trembling caused by cold and fear and steadied the horizon in her binoculars. She saw blurred masses of snow mist appearing along the sky's edge, giving the horizon a furry border.
Then Lin Yun heard the roar of engines behind her. A line of Type 90 and Type 2000 tanks rushed past her position toward the enemy. Behind them, more Chinese tanks were crossing the highway embankment. Lin Yun heard another roar. Enemy attack helicopters appearing in the sky ahead, in tight formation, a black array of dots against the pallid dawn. The smoke dischargers on the tanks around Lin Yun went off, and with a series of dull bursts, the position was shrouded in white smoke. Through gaps in the fog, Lin Yun saw Chinese helicopters sweep overhead. She picked out several Z-10s and
Gazelle helicopters. They were among them.
The tank's 125mm guns began firing like a storm, and the white fog turned into a madly flickering curtain of pink light. Almost at the same time, the first enemy shells came down, and the pink flashes in the white mist were replaced by dazzling blue-white lightning from explosions. Lin Yun lay flat at the bottom of the crater. The ground beneath her felt like a vibrating drum skin under the dense thunder. Earth and small stones leaped high around her and fell across her back. Within the blasts, she could also faintly hear the hiss of anti-tank missiles launching. Lin Yun felt the whole universe shatter in that heart-tearing roar and fall into endless depth.
Just as her nerves were about to break, the tank battle ended. It had lasted only about 30 seconds.
When the white fog and heavy smoke cleared, Lin Yun saw the snow before her scattered with hit Chinese tanks, burning in heaps of fierce fire wrapped in black smoke. Looking farther, without binoculars, she could see a wide field of destroyed NATO tanks too, each a black smoking dot on the snowfield. But more enemy tanks were rushing over the wreckage, wrapped in clouds of snow churned up by their tracks. The fierce flat front of the Abrams broke through the snow mist from time to time, like evil turtles bursting out of waves, and the flashes at their smooth-bore muzzles lit up like shining eyes.
at low altitude, the helicopter melee continued. Lin Yun saw an Apache explode not far away in midair, and a Z-10, trailing leaking fuel, stagger over her head and crash dozens of meters away into a ball of fire. The trails of short-range air-to-air missiles drew countless parallel white lines through the low sky.
Lin Yin heard a clang. Turning, she saw that the bottom rear hatch of a smoking Type 90 tank not far away had opened after being hit. No one came out, only one hand hung below the hatch. Lin Yin jumped from the crater, rushed behind the tank, grabbed the hand, and pulled. A muffled explosion sounded inside the vehicle. A wave of scorching air drove Lin Yin several steps back. In her hand, she held a soft, sticky mass, a piece of cooked skin torn from the tanker's hand.
Lin Yun looked up and saw a flame jet from the bottom hatch. Through it, she saw that the inside of the tank had become a small inferno. In the dark red, transparent fire, the tanker's motionless silhouette was clearly visible, wavering as if underwater.
Lin Yun heard two more shrieks. A missile squad to her left front had fired its last two anti-tank missiles. One wire-guided red tassel missile successfully destroyed an Abrams. The other, a wireless guided missile, was jammed and climbed diagonally upward, losing its target. At that moment, the 6 men of the missile squad left cover and ran toward Lin Yun's crater.
A Comanche helicopter dived at them, its angular body like a savage crocodile.
A long row of machine gun bullets struck the snow, kicking up snow and earth like a fence that suddenly rose and quickly collapsed. The fence passed through the tiny group and knocked down 4 of them. Only a lieutenant and 1 soldier reached the crater. Only then did Lin Yun notice that the lieutenant wore a tank crew shock helmet and might have come from a destroyed tank. Each carried an anti-tank rocket tube. After jumping into the crater, the lieutenant first fired at the nearest enemy tank, striking the front of the M1A2 and triggering its reactive armor. The explosion of the rocket and the reactive armor mingled in a strange sound.
The tank rushed out of the smoke of the explosion, fragments of reactive armor hanging from its front like ragged clothing. The young soldier kept aiming at it. The rocket tube in his hands shook with the tank's motion, and he could not be sure enough to fire. When the tank, only 40 or 50 meters away, plunged into a depression, the soldier had to stand on the edge of the crater and aim downward. His rocket tube and the Abrams' 120mm gun fired at the same time. In panic, the tank gunner had fired a non-explosive depleted uranium penetrator. The shell, with a muzzle velocity of 1,800 meters per second, hit the soldier and turned his upper body into a burst of blood.
Lin Yun felt fine fragments of flesh strike her helmet hard, crackling against it. She opened her eyes and saw, right on the edge of the crater before her, the soldier's 2 legs rolling silently to the bottom, like 2 black stumps landing at her feet. The shattered remains of his body splashed a broad radial pattern of red spots across the snow. The rocket hit the Abrams. The shaped charge jet cut through its armor, and smoke poured from the hull. But the steel monster still dragged smoke as it charged them, stopping only about 20 meters away when an explosion inside the hull threw the turret hatch high into the air.
Immediately afterward, the NATO tank line passed around them, the ground trembling under the heavy impact of their tracks. But these tanks paid no attention to the crater where the 2 of them were. After the first wave of tanks had rushed by, the lieutenant seized Lin Yun's hand, pulled her out of the crater, and brought her to a bullet-riddled jeep. More than 200 meters away, the second armored assault wave was coming fast.
Lie down and play dead.
The lieutenant said it. Lin Yun lay beside the jeep's wheel and closed her eyes.
Keep your eyes open. It looks more real.
The lieutenant said this too, and smeared someone's blood across her face. He lay down as well, at a right angle to Lin Yun, his head close to hers. His helmet rolled aside, and his coarse hair pricked Lin Yun's temple. Lin Yun opened her eyes wide and looked at the sky nearly swallowed by smoke.
2 or 3 minutes later, a half-tracked Bradley personnel carrier stopped a dozen meters from them. Several U.S. soldiers in blue-white snow camouflage jumped down. Most advanced in a skirmish line with their rifles level, but one walked toward the jeep. Lin Yun saw 2 paratrooper boots caked with snow dust step close to her face. She could clearly see the insignia of the 82nd Airborne Division on the handle of the dagger fixed to one boot. The American bent to look at her. Their eyes met.
Lin Yun did everything she could to make her gaze dull and lifeless before those startled blue pupils.
Oh, God.
Lin Yun heard the exclamation. She did not know whether he was amazed by the beauty of the young woman with a major star on her shoulder, by the horrific sight of her blood-smeared face, or by both. Then he reached to unbutton her collar. Gooseflesh rose over Lin Yun's body, and she moved her hand a few centimeters toward the pistol at her waist. But the American only tore away the identification tag hanging from her neck.
They waited longer than expected. Enemy tanks and armored vehicles thundered past them in an unbroken stream on both sides. Lin Yun felt her body freezing into the snow. At that moment, she unexpectedly remembered two lines from a Soviet army poem. A soldier lies on the snow as if lying on velvet.
On the day she received her doctorate, she had written those two lines in her diary. That, too, had been a snowy night. The snow that night had truly been like velvet. The next day she had enlisted.
A column of Japan Ground Self-Defense Force tanks came over and spread out around them before stopping. Several officers climbed down and gathered in an open space ringed by tanks. The officer who summoned them was a colonel in the armored troops, a typical image of Japan's new generation, tall and slender with a pale, handsome face. His voice carried well. Even over the noise of engines, it could be heard clearly.
Why are you crawling like snails? Why are you not taking the highway? He questioned the armored officers around him. You oughta. The road is blocked.
One major helplessly pointed toward the highway. Because the front line had moved on, fire here was thin. Masses of refugees had emerged from hiding and poured onto the highway, which was quickly jammed with civilian vehicles and people. There, dozens of Japanese soldiers fired into the sky trying to clear a route, but it was useless. Lin Yun again heard Colonel Iwata's voice.
The predecessor of our unit was the Itagaki Division, which won repeated achievements on this land during the Second World War. If those elders came back to life, the sight of you would anger them back into their graves. He pressed one hand to the throat microphone at his collar and waved the other.
All vehicles in the column. Follow Vehicle 103.
After speaking, he jumped onto that tank. Its engine roared, and black smoke from the exhaust stirred Lin Yun's hair. The Japanese Type 90 tank leaped forward and climbed the roadbed. On the road stood a group of kindergarten children, 30 or 40 of them, who had just climbed off a disabled bus. A young caregiver stood between the charging tank and the children, waving her arms, but the tank did not hesitate at all. It knocked her down and rushed into the terrified children. From the corner of her eye, Lin Yun saw each small child's body burst into a flower of blood between the snow and the tank tracks, like tomatoes being crushed on a white tablecloth.
After this column of Japanese tanks passed, the area around Lin Yun and the lieutenant became open. They jumped into the jeep. The lieutenant drove, following a route he had already chosen. Behind them came submachine gun fire. Bullets passed overhead, and one shattered a rear-view mirror. The jeep turned sharply into a burning settlement. The enemy did not pursue.
Major, you have a doctorate, don't you? The lieutenant asked as he drove. Where did you learn who I was? I once saw you with the son of Chief Number 10. After a silence, the lieutenant said again,
Now his son is probably the person farthest from the war in the whole world.
What do you mean by that? You should know.
Nothing special, just talking.
The lieutenant said it indifferently. Neither of them had their mind on the subject. Both were thinking of the thin thread of hope that remained. May this be the only breakthrough in the entire line. Chapter 2, The Eternal Flame Emperor Spacecraft.
January 5, near solar orbit.
The Eternal Flame Emperor.
Spacecraft. Zhuangyu felt the loneliness of living alone in a city. The Eternal Flame Emperor.
Space Complex was indeed as large as a small city. Its volume was equal to 2 giant aircraft carriers, and it could allow 5,000 people to live in space at the same time. When the complex was in rotational gravity, it even had a swimming pool and a small river, an almost unheard-of luxury in today's working environment in space. But in fact,
the Eternal Flame Emperor
was the result of the Chinese space program's habitual thinking of thrift. Its design concept was to combine every function for space exploration inside the solar system within one structure. Though the one-time investment was enormous, it would still be highly economical in the long term.
The Eternal Flame Emperor was mockingly called a Swiss army knife in space by the West. It could operate as a space station in Earth orbits at various altitudes. It could move conveniently to lunar orbit or conduct interplanetary exploration flights. The Eternal Flame Emperor
had already flown to Venus and Mars and had explored the asteroid belt. With its enormous size, it was as if a research institute had been moved into space. For space science, it had greater advantages than the many small, exquisite Western spacecraft. When the Eternal Flame Emperor
was preparing to begin a 3-year voyage to Jupiter, war broke out. More than 100 crew members on board all returned to Earth. Most were Air Force officers, and only Zhuangyu remained. At that time, the Eternal Flame Emperor
revealed one defect. Militarily, it was too large a target and it had no defensive capability. Its designers had failed to foresee the later process of space militarization. After the war exploded, the Eternal Flame Emperor
could only fly evasively. It could not head outward into deep space. Inside Jupiter's orbit were many NATO unmanned spacecraft, armed or unarmed, none of them large, but every one of them a mortal threat to the Eternal Flame Emperor, so it could only fly toward near-solar space.
The Eternal Flame Emperor was proud of its active cooling heat shield system, which allowed it to approach the sun more closely than any current human spacecraft. Now,
the Eternal Flame Emperor
had reached Mercury's orbit, 50 million kilometers from the Sun and 100 million kilometers from Earth, although the Eternal Flame Emperor
had shut down most of its cabins. The space left for Zhuangyu was still astonishingly large. Through the broad, transparent dome, the Sun, 3 times larger than it looked from Earth, shone down. The modeling on the solar surface and the splendid prominences in the purple corona could be seen clearly. Sometimes one could even see the granulation created by convection on the photosphere. The quiet here was false. Outside, storms of particle flow and radio waves hurled out by the sun were roaring, and
the Eternal Flame Emperor
was a tiny seed floating in that turbulent ocean.
A thread-like beam of radio waves connected Zhuangyu to Earth and brought him the anxieties of that distant world. He had just learned that the control center outside Beijing had been destroyed by cruise missiles and control of the Eternal Flame Emperor
had been transferred to the second control center in the northwest. Every 5 hours he received war news from Earth. Every time it arrived, he thought of his father, January 5, General Staff Headquarters of the Chinese People's Liberation Army.
Chief Number 10 felt as if he were facing a wall. What lay before him was actually a flat holographic battlefield map of the Beijing-Tianjin war zone. In the past, when he had faced a broad paper map hung on a wall, he could see a vast and deep space. In any case, he still preferred traditional maps. He could no longer remember how many times the location he needed had been at the very bottom of a map, forcing him and his staff officers to crouch on the floor to look. The memory made him smile faintly. He also remembered many times before exercises when he had used clear tape in a field tent to patch together newly issued operational maps. He could never do it well, while his son, the first time he accompanied him to watch an exercise, had done it better at once. When he realized he was thinking of his son again, he stopped himself in alarm.
There were only 2 people in the operations room, him and the commander of the North China Group Army. The latter smoked one cigarette after another. They stared intently at the shifting clouds of smoke above the holographic map, as if those clouds were the severe battle situation itself.
The commander of the North China Group Army said,
NATO landing forces have reached 37 divisions. The attack frontage is 100 kilometers wide. The main axis follows the highway, and they have broken through at several points.
What about the northern line?
Number 10 asked. Russia has assembled 45 divisions, but its attack on Zhangjiakou is still probing in nature. An explosion on the ground sent a faint tremor down to them. The operations room filled with shadows, swaying gently with the hanging lamps on the ceiling.
On the southern line, our only option is to fall back to the Langfang defense line.
The commander of the North China Group Army said it. That is the only next tactical move, but it is not our objective. That line is only one heavy gun range from Beijing and has little meaning now. We must push the enemy back 30 to 40 kilometers toward the sea.
But now some people are already talking about falling back to Beijing and relying on the buildings and fortifications around the city for street fighting.
Nonsense. Once Zhangjiakou falls, or once the enemy on the southern line outflanks from both sides, they may cut off the Meun and Guanting water sources. A surrounded city would fall into chaos without a fight. The next operational principle is, first, counterattack. Second, counterattack. Third, still counterattack.
The North China commander sighed and looked silently at the map. Number 10 continued.
I know the southern line is short of strength. I am preparing to transfer one group army from the northern line to reinforce the south.
What? Zhangjiakou is already difficult to defend. Number 10 smiled.
The misunderstanding of quite a few commanders now is that they consider matters only from a military angle. The severity of the situation has made us crawl inside it and lose perspective. Judging by the current situation, do you think the Russian army lacks the strength to take Zhangjiakou?
I do not think so. Elite units such as the 1st Guards Army, the 2nd Guards Army, and the Taman Infantry Division have concentrated such dense, armored, and low-altitude attack forces. Yet after suffering no major losses, they advanced less than 15 kilometers in a day. They are clearly slowing down intentionally.
Exactly. The Russians are watching. They are watching the southern battle. If we regain battlefield initiative in the south, they will keep watching and may even cease fire unilaterally on the northern line. The North China commander held a cigarette he had just taken out and forgot to light it.
Russia's sudden attack from the north did stab us in the back, but some comrades have treated it psychologically as an excuse, making our operational policy turn passive. That mentality must change. Of course, we must admit that to fundamentally reverse the war, the strength in the Beijing-Tianjin war zone is not enough. Our final hope rests on the reinforcing Northwest Group Army.
The Northwest Group Army will need at least a week to complete assembly and enter its assault positions. Considering air superiority, it may take even longer. January 5, Beijing.
When Lin Yun and the lieutenant drove their jeep into the city, it was already after 3 in the afternoon. The air raid alarm had just sounded, and the streets were empty. The lieutenant let out a long sigh and said,
"Major, I really miss my Type 2000. 4 years ago when I graduated from the Armored Academy, I had just lost a girlfriend. But as soon as I reached the unit and saw that Type 2000, my mood changed from cloudy to clear. I touched its armor. It was smooth and warm, like touching a girl's hand. Ah, what was that girl compared with this? This was a man's true companion. But this morning it took a shot from a northwest wind. Ah, maybe it is still burning now."
At that moment, explosions sounded from the northwest of the city, in the direction of the Zhongguancun Technology District, which had suffered the heaviest bombing. It was also the kind of savage area bombing rarely seen in modern air raids. The lieutenant was still immersed in the morning's battle.
In less than 30 seconds, an entire tank battalion was gone.
The enemy suffered heavy losses too.
Lin Yun said,
I paid attention to the results. The numbers of armored targets destroyed on both sides were not very different.
The tank exchange ratio between the two sides was probably about 1 to 1.3. Helicopters were worse, but no more than 1 to 1.5. If that is true, the initiative should be on our side. We have a great numerical advantage. How could the battle have turned out like this?
The lieutenant turned and glanced at Lin Yun.
You work in electronic warfare, and you still do not understand why? That set of toys of yours worked beautifully in exercises. 5th generation C3I, 3-dimensional battlefield displays, dynamic situation simulation, attack plan optimization, all of it looking so convincing. But in real combat, the 2 lines I saw most often on my LCD were communication error and could not learn. Take this morning. I knew nothing about what was happening on my front or either flank. I received one order: engage the enemy. If we had committed half again as much reinforcing strength, the enemy would not have broken through at our position. The whole front is probably like that.
Lin Yun knew that in the battle just past,
The total number of tanks committed by both sides along the entire line might have exceeded 5,000, with attack helicopters numbering about half as many as the tanks. My steel lover did not lose money.
The lieutenant was still unable to free himself from the morning's battle. I am sure I hit a Leclerc, but what I most wanted to hit was an Abrams. Do you understand? An Abrams Chapter 3, Stars.
January 5th, General Staff Headquarters of the Chinese People's Liberation Army.
For the first time in a week, Number 10 left the underground operations room. He walked on the thick snow, searching for the sun. By then, the sun had half set behind the snow-laden pine woods. In his imagination, a small black dot was slowly moving across the orange-red surface of the sunset. It was
The Eternal Flame Emperor, his son, was aborted. He was the son farthest from his father on this planet.
The matter had raised many rumors inside the country. Internationally, the enemy made full use of it. The New York Times printed a headline in terrifyingly large, bold type: "The deserter who fled farthest in the history of war." Below it was Zhuang Yu's photograph. The caption said, "While the communist government incites 1.3 billion Chinese to drown the invaders in blood, the son of the supreme military commander has taken the nation's only giant spacecraft and fled to a place 100 million kilometers from the battlefield. He is now the safest man in the country."
But Number 10's heart was calm. In memory of his wife, who had died young, he had let his son take his mother's surname. From middle school through postdoctoral work, almost no one around Zhuang Yu knew who his father was. The Space Control Center had made this decision only because Zhuang Yu's research specialty was mathematical modeling of stars.
The Eternal Flame Emperor was approaching the sun, and this was a rare opportunity for his research. The complex could not fly entirely by remote control. At least one person had to be aboard. The commander-in-chief had learned Zhuang Yu's identity only later from Western news.
On the other hand, whether Number 10 admitted it or not, deep in his heart he truly hoped his son would stay far from war. This was not only because of blood ties. Number 10 always felt that his son did not belong to war. Yes, he was the person in the world least suited to war. Yet he also knew there was something wrong with this thought, who, after all, belonged to war.
Besides, did Zhuang Yu belong to the stars? He loved stars and devoted his whole life to studying them, but he himself was the opposite of a star. He was more like Pluto, like that silent, cold planet, moving alone in remote space where worldly light could not reach. Zhuang Yu's temperament, together with his fair and delicate appearance, easily made people feel he was like a girl. But Number 10 knew in his heart that his son was not like a girl in essence. Girls feared loneliness, but Zhuang Yu loved loneliness. Loneliness was his nourishment, his air.
As early as primary school, Zhuang Yu spent every evening quietly alone in his small room. At first, Number 10 thought he was reading, but once he discovered by accident that his son was standing motionless before the window, looking at the stars.
"Daddy, I like stars. I want to look at stars for my whole life." That was what he told his father.
On his 11th birthday, Zhuang Yu made the only request he had ever made. He wanted an astronomical telescope. Before that, he had always used Number 10's military binoculars to observe the stars. Later, that telescope became Zhuang Yu's only companion. He could watch the stars from the balcony until the east turned pale. On the few occasions when father and son watched the stars together on the balcony, Number 10 always aimed the telescope at the brightest-looking star in the night sky, but his son shook his head disapprovingly.
That one is not interesting, Dad. That is Venus. Venus is a planet. I only like stars.
But Zhuang Yu had no interest at all in the things other boys liked. The chubby boy next door, the son of Chief of Staff Zhao, once stole his father's pistol to play with and shot through his own thigh. Among the boys in the General Staff family compound, the highest reward was to have their fathers take them to a military firing range to shoot a gun. But that natural attachment boys have to weapons never appeared in Zhuang Yu. In that sense, he really was unlike other boys.
Number 10 was uneasy about this. He could almost not tolerate a general's son being indifferent to weapons, to the point that later he did something that still embarrassed him whenever he remembered it. Once, he quietly placed his Type 77 pistol on his son's desk. Soon after returning from school, Zhuang Yu came out of his small room holding the gun. He held it like a woman, carefully by the barrel, and gently put it before his father, saying lightly,
Dad, do not leave this thing lying around again.
On the question of Zhuang Yu's future, Number 10 was an open-minded person. Unlike the generals around him, he did not single-mindedly want his son or even his daughter to continue his military career. But Zhuang Yu was indeed too far, far too far, from his father's profession. Number 10 was not hot-tempered. But as a senior commander, he had more than once rebuked a general before tens of thousands of officers and soldiers. With Zhuang Yu, however, he had never lost his temper. Partly this was because Zhuang Yu had always grown silently along his own orbit and rarely worried his father. More importantly, Zhuang Yu seemed born with an extraordinary detachment, a quality that sometimes even made Number 10 feel awe. It was as if he had casually buried a seed in a flower box, and an incomparable rare plant had grown from it. He watched the plant grow day by day with reverence, carefully protecting it and waiting for it to bloom.
His expectations had not been disappointed. His son had now become one of the finest astrophysicists in the world.
By then, the sun had fully set behind the pine woods, and the snow on the ground changed from white to pale blue. Number 10 withdrew from his thoughts and returned to the underground operations room. Everyone for the operational meeting had arrived, including the principal commanders of the North China and Northwest Group armies. There were also more electronic warfare commanders, from major generals down to captains, most of them just back from the front. A fierce argument was underway in the operations room between officers of the North China Group's ground combat units and its electronic warfare units.
We correctly judged the enemy's change in main attack direction.
A senior colonel division commander from C Group Army said this.
Our armored forces and Army aviation low-altitude attack forces are not lacking in mobility either, but the communication system was jammed into a complete mess, and the C3I command system simply could not function. The electronic warfare units in the group armies have risen from battalion level to regiment level, and then from regiment to division. In these 2 years, more money has been invested in this than in conventional equipment. And this is the result?
The major general responsible for commanding electronic warfare in the war zone glanced at Lin Yun beside him.
Like the other officers just returned from the front, her camouflage uniform was covered with stains and scorch marks, and blood still remained on her face. The Major General said,
Major Lin has deep expertise in electronic warfare research, and she is also the electronic warfare observer sent to the front by the General Staff. Her view may be more persuasive.
Young doctoral officers like Lin Yun were mostly blunt and fearless. People often used them as a gun. This time was no exception. Chapter 4. The Shared Dark Battlefield. Lin Yun stood and said,
Division Commander, you cannot put it that way. This is not a question of how much money was invested. When the West had already studied C3I in depth for more than 10 years, we had barely formed a few concepts of it.
Then what about electronic countermeasures?
The division commander asked.
If the enemy can jam us, why can't you jam them? Our C3I is paralyzed, but NATO's runs very well, as if it had been oiled. The fact that the 1st Marine Division facing me this morning could change its attack direction so quickly proves that.
Lin Yun gave a bitter smile. When you mention jamming the enemy, Comrade Senior Colonel, do not forget that on your division's position, your own men pressed guns to the operators' heads and forced the Group Army's electronic countermeasures, jammers, to stop.
What happened?
Number 10 asked. Only then did people notice he had entered. They all rose and saluted.
Chief, it was like this.
The division commander explained to Number 10. For our communications and command system, their jamming was worse than NATO's. Under NATO jamming, we could still maintain some radio communications. Once our own jammers were switched on, they covered us completely. Lin Yun said,
But they covered the enemy completely at the same time. That is the only strategy our army can currently choose for electronic countermeasures. NATO has already widely adopted technologies in battlefield communications, such as frequency hopping, direct sequence spread spectrum, null steering adaptive antennas, burst transmission, single frequency relay, and frequency agility. Targeted jamming by frequency will not work against them. We can only use full-band barrage jamming across the spectrum.
A colonel from B Group Army challenged her.
Major, NATO is using targeted jamming, and the bands are quite narrow. Our C3I system also widely uses the communications technologies you mentioned. Why is their jamming against us so effective?
The reason is simple. What software and hardware platforms are our C3I systems built on? Unix, Linux, even Windows 2 Series C? No. The CPUs are Intel and AMD. That is using someone else's dog to guard your own gate. Under such conditions, the enemy can quickly obtain electronic warfare intelligence such as frequency hopping patterns, while using more and more effective pure software attacks to strengthen the effect of their jamming. The General Staff and General Armaments Department once strongly promoted domestic operating systems, but resistance below was heavy. Your B Group Army was one of the most stubborn strongholds.
Enough. The problems and contradictions you are all talking about are precisely what today's meeting must resolve. Meeting begins. Number 10, cut off the argument.
After everyone sat before the electronic sand table, Number 10 called over a major staff officer. The tall, thin young man had eyes narrowed to slits, as if he could not adapt
to the light in the operations room.
Let me introduce him. This is Major Yang. His most distinctive feature is severe myopia. His glasses are different from other people's. Other people's lenses sit inside the frames. His lenses sit outside the frames. Ha! As thick as the bottoms of teacups. We cannot see them now. This morning, when Major Yang's Jeep was hit in an air raid, they were smashed. It seems he also lost his contact lenses.
Reporting, Chief. I lost those 3 days ago at the beachhead position. My eyes became like this within half a year. If the change had come earlier, I could not have joined the Army.
The Major said this at attention. Although no one knew why Number 10 was introducing this Major, a few low laughs still sounded from the crowd.
The facts since the war began show that, despite the defeat in the Bohai Gulf naval battle, in terms of conventional weapons in the air and on land, we are not far behind the enemy. But in electronic warfare, the gap is unexpectedly huge. This situation has deep historical causes. That is not what we are discussing today. What we must make clear is this. At present, electronic warfare is the key to our armies regaining the initiative in this war.
First, we must acknowledge the enemy's superiority in electronic warfare, even its overwhelming superiority. Then, based on the electronic warfare hardware and software conditions our army actually has, we must formulate a set of effective strategies and tactics. The purpose of that set of strategies and tactics is to create, in a short time, a certain balance of power between our army and NATO in electronic warfare. Perhaps you think this is impossible. Since the end of the last century, our army's war theory has mainly been based on local, limited wars. We have indeed not studied enough the all-out offensive of an enemy so strong militarily as the one we now face.
Under such severe circumstances, we must think in an entirely new way. The new electronic warfare strategy of the High Command that I will now introduce can be seen as the result of that way of thinking.
The lights went out. The computer screens and electronic sand tables shut down. The heavy radiation-proof doors also sealed tight. The operations room sank into darkness so complete one could not see a hand before one's face. I ordered the lights turned off. Number 10's voice came from the darkness.
Time flowed slowly through darkness and silence. About a minute passed.
What do you all feel now?
Number 10 asked. No one answered. The heavy darkness made the officers feel as if they had sunk to the bottom of a sea of night. Even breathing felt difficult. Commander Zheng, tell us.
It feels like the battlefield these last few days.
The commander of C Group Army said it, and another low wave of laughter sounded in the darkness.
And the rest of you probably feel much the same.
Number 10 said it, of course, Chief. Think about it. There is nothing in the headset but static. The screen is blank, and you know nothing about orders or the battlefield situation around you. Is that not exactly this feeling? This darkness presses so hard a man can hardly breathe.
But not everyone feels that way. Major Yang, what about you?
Number 10 asked. Major Yang's voice came from a corner of the operations room. Chief, my feeling is not as terrible as theirs. Even when the lights are on, everything around me is already blurry.
You even have a certain sense of superiority, don't you?
Number 10 asked. Yes, Chief. You may have heard that during the New York blackout, it was some blind people who led others out of skyscrapers.
But Commander Zheng's feeling is understandable too. He has a pair of eagle eyes and is an excellent marksman. Every holiday at unit banquets, he performs by shooting open bottle caps from more than 10 meters away with a pistol. Imagine him and Major Yang dueling with pistols at a time like this. It would be very interesting.
The operations room in darkness fell silent again. The commanders were thinking. The lights came on. People narrowed their eyes. This was less because they could not adapt to the sudden brightness than because they were shocked by the thought Number 10 had just hinted at. Number 10 stood and said,
I think I have just made clear our Army's next new strategy in electronic warfare. High-power full-band barrage jamming, creating a battlefield of total electromagnetic darkness, shared by both sides.
That will paralyze our battlefield command system completely.
Someone said in alarm, NATO will be the same. Everyone blind together, everyone deaf together. Under those conditions, we achieve a balance of power with the enemy in electronic warfare. That is the core idea of the new strategy.
Surely you do not mean we will issue operational orders by sending couriers on motorcycles.
If the roads are bad, they may have to ride horses.
Number 10 said it.
We have made a rough estimate. Full-band barrage jamming of this sort can cover at least 70% of NATO's battlefield communications systems, which means their C3I system will be comprehensively paralyzed. At the same time, it can disable 50 to 60% of the enemy's long-range strike weapons. The most obvious example is the Tomahawk cruise missile. Its guidance system has changed greatly from that of the last century. At that time, Tomahawks mainly used terrain matching and small altimeter radar for navigation. Now that method is used only for terminal guidance, while most of the range depends on the satellite global positioning system. General Dynamics and McDonnell.
Douglas thought this improvement was a major advance. Americans trust navigation radio waves from space too much. But once GPS radio transmission is jammed, the Tomahawk becomes blind. This dependence on GPS exists in most NATO long-range strike weapons. When the battlefield electromagnetic conditions we envision appear, we will force the enemy to fight a conventional war with us. We can close in and fight tight, making full use of our advantages.
I still do not feel sure.
The commander of A Group Army, being transferred from the northern line to the southern line, spoke anxiously.
Under battlefield communications conditions like that, I even doubt whether my group army can move smoothly from the north to the south.
You certainly can.
Number 10 said,
That distance would not have been long for Liu Bei or Cao Cao. I do not believe today's Chinese army cannot cover it once it loses radio. If anyone has been spoiled by modern equipment, it should be the Americans, not us. I know that when the whole battlefield falls into electromagnetic darkness, you will certainly feel fear. At that moment, remember this: the enemy will be 10 times more afraid than you.
Chapter 5. Codename Flood. Aribulation Scrappus, that Fiterastrek Eberwe.
As he watched Lin Yun's figure merge with the group of camouflage-clad officers and disappear through the operations room exit, Number 10's heart tightened. She would return to the front, and the electronic warfare unit she belonged to would be where enemy fire was most concentrated. Yesterday, during a conversation with his son 100 million kilometers away, with a round-trip delay of 5 minutes, Number 10 had told him Lin Yun was fine. But in the morning's battle, she had almost failed to return.
Zhuang Yu and Lin Yun had met during a military exercise.
That day, number 10 was eating dinner with his son. As usual, they ate in silence, while Zhuang Yu's mother, who had died young, watched them silently from a frame in the distance. Suddenly, Zhuang Yu said,
Dad, I remembered that tomorrow is your 51st birthday. I should give you a birthday present. I remembered because I saw the astronomical telescope. That present was truly good.
Give me a few days of your time. His son raised his head and looked quietly at his father. You have your career, and I am glad of it. But is it too much for a father to want his son to understand his own career? How about coming with me tomorrow to watch a military exercise?
Zhuang Yu smiled and nodded. He seldom smiled. It was the largest domestic exercise of the year. On the night before it began, Zhuang Yu showed no interest in the rolling torrent of steel passing along the highway. As soon as he got off the helicopter, he went into the field tent and helped his father tape together the newly issued operational maps. During the whole exercise the next day, Zhuang Yu showed not the slightest interest which number 10 had expected. But one thing gave him immense comfort.
The morning exercise called for an armored division to attack a height. Zhuang Yu sat with a group of local officials on the north side of the reviewing stand. Although the stand was at a safe distance, it had been placed much farther forward than before, at the request of those curious local officials. H-12 bombers swept over the height, and heavy aerial bombs fell like rain, turning the hilltop into an erupting volcano. Only then did the local officials understand the difference between a real battlefield and a movie. Amid the earth-shaking roar, they all covered their heads with both arms and crouched on the tables. Several women even screamed and tried to crawl under the tables.
But number 10 saw that only Zhuang Yu still sat upright there, still wearing that indifferent expression, quietly and unmoved as he watched the terrifying volcano and let the explosion flashes leap across his sunglasses. At that moment, a warm current struck number 10's heart. Son, military blood flows in you after all.
That evening, father and son walked across the daytime exercise ground. In the distance, the headlights of various armored vehicles scattered across the valley and plain like stars. The faint smell of gunpowder still lingered in the air.
How much did this exercise cost?
Zhuang Yu asked. Direct expenses are about 300 million. Zhuang Yu sighed. Our research group wants to work on a third-generation stellar evolution model. We applied for 350,000 in funding and could not get approval.
Number 10 said what he had long wanted to say to his son.
The worlds we live in are too far apart. Your stars, even the nearest one, are 4 light-years away, yes? They truly seem unrelated to armies and wars on Earth. I know little about your work, but I am proud of it. As soldiers, we are also the fathers who most want our sons to understand our profession. What father does not count telling his son about his military life as one of his greatest joys? Yet you always treat my profession with a kind of cold indifference. In fact, my profession is the foundation and guarantee of yours. If a country lacks armed forces of sufficient quantity and quality to secure its peace, pure basic research like yours cannot be conducted at all.
Dad, you have it backward.
If people were all like us, devoting their entire lives to exploring the universe, they would appreciate the beauty of the universe, the beauty behind its vastness and depth. A person who deeply feels the inner beauty of the universe and nature would not wage war.
That idea of yours is childish to the extreme. If war is caused by people's lack of aesthetic feeling, then peace would be far too easy. Do you think it is so easy to make humanity feel that kind of beauty? Zhuang Yu pointed at the brilliant sea of stars in the night sky.
Look at these stars. Everyone knows they are beautiful, but how many people can truly experience the deepest layer of that beauty? The evolution of these countless celestial bodies from nebulae to black holes is so magnificent, and the energy they erupt is so vast and violent. But do you know that all of it can be described precisely with only a small number of elegant equations? Mathematical models built from those equations can predict all stellar behavior with extreme accuracy. Even our mathematical models of the atmosphere on our own planet are several orders of magnitude less accurate.
Number 10 nodded. That is possible. They say humanity knows more about the moon than about Earth's seafloor. But feeling the deep beauty of the universe and nature still cannot stop war. No one felt that beauty more than Einstein. Yet, wasn't the atomic bomb built on his recommendation?
Einstein achieved little in his later research, largely because he became too involved in politics. I will not follow his old road. But Dad, when the time comes, I too will fulfill my responsibility.
Zhuang Yu stayed in the exercise area for 5 days. Number 10 did not know when his son had met Lin Yun. The first time he saw them together, they were already talking harmoniously. They were talking about stars, and Lin Yun knew a great deal about them. Looking at Lin Yun, still an innocent, bright girl, who had already put a major's star on her shoulder because of her doctorate, he felt somewhat uncomfortable. Apart from that, however, his impression of Lin Yun was very good. The second time he saw Zhuang Yu and Lin Yun together, Number 10 saw that there was already some intimacy between them. The content of their conversation surprised him. They were talking about electronic warfare.
At the time, the two were beside a tank not far from Number 10's Jeep. Because of the subject of their conversation, they made no effort to avoid being overheard. Number 10 heard Zhuang Yu say,
"Right now you are focused only on high-level, purely software things such as C3I, virus attacks, digital battlefields, and so on. But have you considered that you may be holding a sword made of wood?"
Seeing Lin Yun's astonished look, Zhuang Yu continued.
Have you thought about the foundation of these things? That is, the physical layer at the bottom of the 7-layer network protocol. Civilian networks can use things such as optical fiber and directional lasers as communications media. But for battlefield C3I systems, every terminal is moving fast and its position is uncertain, so they can mainly rely only on electric wave. But the links, as you know, are as fragile as thin ice on jamming.
Number 10 was genuinely astonished. He had never discussed these things with his son, and Zhuang Yu could not have read his classified documents. Yet he had expressed, concisely and accurately, the thinking Number 10 had formed over many years about electronic warfare. Zhuang Yu's words had an even greater effect on Lin Yun. They actually made her deviate from her own research direction and develop an electromagnetic jamming device code, named
Flood, the electromagnetic jamming device. Flood.
was small enough to fit inside an armored vehicle. It could simultaneously emit powerful electromagnetic jamming waves from 3 kHz to 30 GHz, covering every electromagnetic communications band except millimeter wave. Its first test, at a Northwest base, brought the Army a mountain of lawsuits. Flood.
Knocked out all electromagnetic communications in the nearby large city of the Northwest.
As for his son falling in love with a girl in the army, Number 10 found it deeply unexpected. At first, he concluded that Zhuang Yu's feelings for Lin Yun had nothing to do with her profession. Later, the city's mobile phones stopped working, pagers stopped beeping, televisions and radios received no signal, and the effect on banks and the stock market was disastrous. Local authorities described the losses as astronomical.
Flood was inspired by a kind of electromagnetic bomb, a weapon that used high explosive to produce a powerful electromagnetic pulse in a disposable coil. Therefore, Flood
worked like a rocket engine. The sound it produced shattered nearby window glass. This meant it could only be operated remotely, and even operators 2,000 or 3,000 meters away had to wear protective suits against microwave radiation. Flood
caused great controversy in the General Armaments Department and the Electronic Warfare Command organs of the General Staff. Many people believed it had no real combat value. Using it on a limited battlefield would be like using a nuclear weapon in street fighting, with equal lethality to friend and foe. But at Number 10's insistence,
Flood was still produced in a batch of more than 200 units. Now, in the High Command's new electronic warfare strategy, it would play the main role. Later, Zhuang Yu brought Lin Yun home several times. The first time, Lin Yun wore a bright dress. When she left, Number 10 heard Zhuang Yu say to her,
"Come in uniform next time."
This made Number 10 reject his earlier conclusion. He now knew that Zhuang Yu's love for Lin Yun was not entirely unrelated to her being a major. He again felt what he had felt on the first morning of the exercise. The major's star on Lin Yun's shoulder now seemed incomparably beautiful to him.
Chapter 6: The Beijing-Tianjin War Zone. January 6, Beijing-Tianjin War Zone.
Powerful electromagnetic waves quickly gathered over the war zone and finally formed a gigantic electromagnetic typhoon. After the war, people recalled that even in mountain villages far from the front, animals and birds were seen stirring uneasily. In blacked-out cities, people could see tiny sparks induced on television antennas.
An armored regiment of a group army, transferred from the northern line to the southern line, was marching at high speed. The regimental commander stood beside a jeep parked at the roadside, watching with satisfaction as his troops advanced rapidly through sky-filling snow dust. Enemy airstrikes were far weaker than expected, so the troops could travel by daylight. At that moment, 3 Tomahawk missiles passed low over their heads, the deep buzz of their ramjets clearly audible. Soon afterward, 3 explosions sounded in the distance. The signalman beside the regimental commander had nothing to do but hold a headset full of static. He turned to look toward the explosions, then cried out and asked the commander to look. The commander told him not to make a fuss, but a major battalion commander nearby also asked him to look. So he did. Then he shook his head in confusion.
Tomahawks did not hit their targets every time, but for 3 missiles to fall separately into empty fields, thousands of meters apart, was truly rare.
Two J-10 fighters flew alone at an altitude of 5,000 meters over the war zone. They had originally belonged to a J-10 squadron, but that squadron had just fought an encounter battle over the sea with a NATO F-22 squadron. In the aerial melee, they had become separated from their squadron. In the past, regrouping would have been effortless. Now radio contact was impossible, and airspace that had once felt narrow to high-speed fighters now felt as vast as the universe. Finding the squadron again was like searching for a needle in the ocean. The leader and wingman could only fly close together, so close it looked like aerobatics. Only then could they hear each other's radio calls.
Suspicious target at upper left. Bearing 220, elevation 30.
The wingman reported. The lead pilot looked along that bearing. The clear sky after winter snow was pure blue, and visibility was excellent. The two aircraft moved diagonally upward to approach and observe the target. It was flying in the same direction as they were, but much slower, so they quickly caught it.
When they saw the target shape clearly, it truly felt like seeing a ghost in daylight. It was a NATO E-4A early warning aircraft. The enemy aircraft a fighter was least likely to encounter, just as a person is unlikely to see the back of his own head. The radar aboard an E-4A could monitor an area of 1 million square kilometers, make a full sweep in only 5 seconds, detect targets 2,000 kilometers beyond a defended zone, provide more than 40 minutes of warning time, detect 800 to 1,000 electromagnetic signals within a range of 1 to 2,000 kilometers, and interrogate and identify 2,000 targets of every kind on sea, land, and air in each scan.
An early warning aircraft never needed escort. Its powerful 1,000-mile eyes let it stay far away from fighter threats. Therefore, the lead pilot naturally believed this might be a trap. He and the wingman carefully searched the surrounding airspace. In the clear, cold sky, they could see nothing. The leader decided to take a risk.
Leicho, I am starting an attack. Guard bearing 317, but do not go beyond visual range.
After watching his wingman fly toward the bearing where he thought an ambush most likely waited, he lit afterburner and pulled hard on the stick. The J-10 dragged accelerating black smoke as it lunged diagonally upward at the early warning aircraft like a cobra rearing its head. The E-4A now discovered the threat approaching it and hastily maneuvered southeast to escape, with magnesium flares to decoy heat-seeking missiles popping from its tail. That string of tiny, light balls looked like its soul frightened out of its shell. Before a fighter, an early warning aircraft was like a bicycle before a motorcycle. It could not escape. Only then did the lead pilot feel how selfish the order he had given his wingman had been.
He followed far behind and above the E-4A, admiring the prey already in his hands. The blue-white radar dome on the E-4A's back had graceful lines, like a pleasing Christmas toy. Its thick white fuselage was like a fat stewed duck on a plate, making him salivate and yet hesitate to cut it with knife and fork. But instinct told him not to delay. He first fired a burst from his 20-millimeter cannon, shattering the radar dome. He saw fragments of the Westinghouse AN/PY-3 radar antenna scatter through the air like silver Christmas confetti.
Next, he cut off one wing of the E-4A with the cannon. Finally, the death whip from the twin-barreled cannon, firing 6,000 rounds per minute, slashed across the already tumbling E-4A and cut it in two. The J-10 followed the two falling pieces of fuselage along a descending spiral. The pilot saw people and equipment falling continuously from the cabin, like candies spilling from a box. Several parachute blossoms opened in the air. He He remembered what had happened to a comrade shot down in the air battle just past. An F-22 had passed 3 times above the comrade's parachute, overturning it while he watched the comrade vanish little by little against the white background of the earth like a stone.
He restrained the impulse to do the same. After rejoining his wingman, the two-plane formation left the airspace at the highest speed possible. He still felt it might be a trap.
The two fighters were not the only aircraft to lose their way. Over the Langfang line, an aircraft belonging to the U.S. Army 1st Cavalry Division, a Comanche, was flying without a clear objective. Its pilot, Lieutenant Walker, felt intensely excited. He had only recently converted from the Apacheto.
The Comanche and was not yet used to this attack helicopter, which had begun large-scale Army service only at the end of the previous century. He was not used to the Comanche's control system without pedals, and he felt its binocular helmet sight was less comfortable than the Apache's.
Monocular sight. But what he was least used to was Captain Honey, the attack commander, sitting in the front seat. When they first met, Honey had said,
Lieutenant, you must be clear about your position. I am the brain of this helicopter. You are only part of its electronic and mechanical components. You must fulfill a component's responsibility.
Walker hated existing as a component. He remembered a former naval aviator almost 100 years old, a veteran of the Second World War, visiting their base. The old man looked at the Comanche cockpit, shook his head, and said,
Ah, boys, in my day, my Mustang had fewer instruments in the cockpit than a microwave oven has now. My best instrument was this. He patted Walker's rear. The difference between our 2 generations of pilots is the difference between aerial knights and computer operators.
Walker wanted to be an aerial knight. Now the opportunity had come. Under the Chinese people's almost pathological, insane jamming, everything on this helicopter, the integrated mission equipment system, the target acquisition system, the actual Yuri target detection and classification system, the
real scene vision generator,
and the data burst system and so on had all gone into shock. Only the 2,200 horsepower T-800 engines were still turning faithfully. Honey had normally lived entirely by those electronic toys. Now his stinking, chattering mouth had fallen silent along with them. Then Walker heard Honey's voice over the intercom.
Attention. Target detected. It seems to be ahead left. Seems to be beside that small hill. There is an armored unit. Seems to be enemy. You handle it as you see fit. Walker nearly laughed aloud. Ha! This kid. Listen to how he used to give orders.
Target detected, bearing 133. 17 Type 90 tanks. 21 Type 89 personnel carriers. Moving on, bearing 391 at average speed, 43.5 kilometers per hour. Average interval, 31.4 meters. Use optimized attack plan AJ Ento 41. Enter from bearing 179 at a 37-degree angle.
And now? Seems there is an armored unit. Seems to be
beside the hill.
Do I need you to tell me that? I saw it long ago, and he tells me to handle it as I see fit. You are useless now, Honey. Now this is my world. I'm going to use my rear end as an instrument and become a knight. This Comanche in my hands will not disgrace the brave Indian tribe whose name it bears.
The Comanche.
charged toward the obvious target and fired all 62 of its 2.75-inch hydro rockets. Walker watched in ecstasy as his swarm of little bees with fiery tails flew joyfully toward the target and drowned the enemy column in a sea of fire. But when he circled to observe the results, he found something wrong. The enemy soldiers on the ground were not taking cover. All of them stood in the snow, pointing at him as if cursing. Walker flew closer and clearly saw the marking on a destroyed armored vehicle. 3 concentric rings, blue in the center, then a white ring, then a red ring.
Walker's vision went dark. He felt the world turn into hell. He began cursing too. "You blind son of a bitch, you idiot! Are you blind?" But he was smart enough to fly far away, in case those enraged Frenchmen fired back.
You son of a bitch, now you are probably thinking about how to pin the blame on me at the court-martial. You cannot. You are responsible for target identification. You had better understand that.
Maybe we still have a chance to make it right, Honey said timidly.
I have found another unit. It is right opposite us.
Go to hell,
Walker said angrily. This time there is no mistake. They are exchanging fire with the French.
Now Walker became excited again. He flew the helicopter toward the new target and saw that the other side was mainly infantry with little armor, which did support Honey's judgment. Walker fired the 4 remaining Hellfire.
Missiles. Then set the Gatling twin-barrel machine gun to 1,500 rounds per minute and began shooting. He felt with pleasure the slight vibration transmitted through the aircraft by the gun and saw the enemy skirmish line on the ground sprinkled with a layer of white.
Pepper.
But the intuition of an experienced attack helicopter pilot told him there was danger. He turned his head and saw a shoulder-fired missile just launched from the left below by a soldier standing on a jeep. Walker hurriedly fired decoy magnesium flares and made an evasive turn backward, but he was a little late. The missile, dragging spider-silk white smoke, struck
the Comanche,
beneath the nose. When Walker woke from the brief dizziness caused by the explosion, he found the helicopter had crashed into the snow. He struggled out of the cabin full of white smoke, clutched a tree that had just been cut in half by the rotor, and looked back to see Captain Honey in the front cockpit blasted into pulp. Then he saw a group of soldiers with submachine guns running toward him. Their East Asian faces were clear. Trembling, Walker drew his pistol and placed it in the snow before him, then took out a phrase book and began to read.
I have put down weapons. I am prisoner war. Geneva.
He took a rifle butt to the back of his head and a kick to the stomach. But as he rolled onto the snow, he laughed aloud. He might be beaten half to death, but not all the way to death. He had seen the insignia of the Japanese self-defense forces on those East Asian soldiers' collars. Chapter 7.
The Kitty Hawk Aircraft Carrier. January 7, Bohai Gulf. The Kitty Hawk Aircraft Carrier Battle Group, NATO Expeditionary Force Combat Command Center.
Get that damned medical officer here!
Admiral Tony Parker shouted irritably. When the tall, thin Colonel Medical Officer hurried to him, Parker said angrily,
What the hell is going on? You have worked on it twice, and my dentures are still buzzing.
General, This is the strangest thing I have ever seen. Perhaps there is a problem with your nervous system. Should I give you a local anesthetic injection? At that moment, a major staff officer came over and said, "General, please give me the dentures. I have a method."
Parker removed the dentures and placed them on the tissue the Major held out.
The media's usual account of the general's 2 missing front teeth was that he had lost them when his tank was hit in the Gulf War. Only the general himself knew this was not true. That time his lower jaw had been broken. The teeth had been lost earlier. It was at Clark Air Base when the world seemed made of nothing but volcanic ash. The sky was gray, the ground was gray, the air was gray, and even the soul.
Hercules.
Aircraft that he and the last group of personnel at the base were about to board had a thick white layer on its top. The dark red light of volcanic lava appeared and vanished in the depths of that grayness. The Filipino female employee had still found him. She said the base was gone. She had lost her job. Her house was buried under ash, and how were she and the child in her belly supposed to live? She pulled at him and begged him to take her to America. He told her it was impossible. So she took off a high-heeled shoe and hit him in the face with it, knocking out his 2 front teeth. Looking at the gray seawater, Parker silently thought, "My child, where are you now? Are you living with your mother in the slums of Manila?"
Your father has returned to the East. In a certain sense, he is fighting for you now. After the war, Subic and Clark will again become American naval and air bases in the Pacific. They will be more prosperous than in the last century, and you will find work there. If you are a girl, maybe, like your mother. What was her name? Oh, Alina. You may meet an American officer. Most importantly, this war will bring your country a wonderful gift, something you have long wanted. Those beautiful islands in the South China Sea. I have seen them from the air, white coral surrounding brown sand, like pairs of eyes in the blue sea. Child, those are your father's eyes.
The Major who had repaired the dentures returned and interrupted the general's wandering thoughts. The general took the dentures from the tissue, put them in, felt them for a few seconds, and looked at the Major in surprise. How did you do that?"
General, your dentures were making noise because they were resonating with electromagnetic waves. The general stared at the major, plainly not believing him.
"General, it really is true. Perhaps you have been exposed to strong electromagnetic waves before, for example, within radar irradiation range, but those waves did not match the natural frequency of your dentures. Now, every band of electromagnetic waves in the air is strong, so this happened. I modified the dentures so their resonant frequency is much higher. They are still resonating now, but you cannot feel it."
After the major left, General Parker's gaze fell on a clock beside the electronic operations map. The base of the clock was a statue of Hannibal riding an elephant, with 3 words engraved on it, "Victory in War." It had once stood in the Blue Room of the White House. When the president noticed Parker's eyes kept falling on that thing, he personally picked up the clock that had stood there for more than a century and gave it to him.
"God bless America, General. Now you are God." Parker thought for a long time, then slowly said,
Order the whole line to stop the offensive. Use all air power to search for and destroy the Chinese jamming sources.
January 8th.
General Staff Headquarters of the Chinese People's Liberation Army.
The enemy has stopped attacking. You do not seem happy about it.
Number 10 said this to the commander of a group army, who had just returned from the front. It is hard to be happy. NATO's entire air power has concentrated on striking our jamming units. Those strikes are indeed very effective.
This was within our expectations. Number 10 said calmly.
Our strategy is like flailing without form before a master martial artist. At first, it leaves him at a loss, but he will always think of a way to respond. Jammers used for barrage jamming are easy to detect and destroy because of their powerful full-band emissions. Fortunately, we have already gained considerable time. Now all hope rests on the Northwest Group Army's rapid assembly.
The situation may be more severe than expected.
The commander of a group army said it.
Before we lose our electronic warfare advantage, we may not leave enough time for the Northwest Group Army to enter its assault positions.
After the commander of A Group Army left, Number 10 looked at the terrain of the front on the electronic sand table and thought of Lin Yun under the enemy's dense fire. That made him think again of Zhuang Yu. One day, Zhuang Yu had come home with bruises on his face. Before that, Number 10 had already heard rumors that his son was the only anti-war student at that famous university and had been beaten by other students.
I only said not to speak lightly of war.
Zhuang Yu explained to his father. Number 10 said to his son, with a severity he had never used before.
You know your position. You may keep silent, but from now on, words and actions like that are absolutely forbidden.
Zhuang Yu nodded. One evening, as soon as Number 10 entered the house, he told Zhuang Yu, Russia's Tupolev far-right government has come to power. Zhuang Yu looked at his father and said lightly,
Let's eat.
A few days later, before dinner, Number 10 said again,
Russia has joined NATO.
His son looked at his father again with that calm gaze. And then the two ate in silence.
After that came the war on the Korean Peninsula, conflicts in the South China Sea, and on the China-India border. Number 10 no longer needed to tell Zhuang Yu. Father and son ate dinner every evening in silence as usual, until one day Zhuang Yu received notice from the space base and packed his luggage. 2 days later, he took a space plane to board 9 discours.
The Eternal Flame Emperorn Low Earth Orbit. Another week later, full-scale war broke out. A total war launched by an unprecedentedly powerful enemy from an unexpected direction with the aim of destroying the Republic completely. January 9, near solar orbit.
The Eternal Flame Emperor
passes Mercury because the Eternal Flame Emperor
was moving very fast. It could not become a satellite of Mercury. It could only fly past the sunlit side of the planet at high speed. This was the first time in history that human eyes had directly observed Mercury's surface at close range. Zhuang Yu saw cliffs 2 kilometers high, winding for hundreds of kilometers across plains covered with huge craters. He also saw the basin that planetary geologists called
the incredible terrain,
and whose name was
Caloris.
The basin was 1,300 kilometers in diameter. Its astonishing feature was that on the opposite side of Mercury, another basin of similar size faced it directly. People guessed that a huge comet had struck Mercury, and the powerful shock wave had passed through the entire planet, forming 2 extremely similar basins on opposite hemispheres. Zhuang Yu also discovered many new and exciting things. He found many bright patches on Mercury's surface. When he enlarged those patches on the screen, he was so excited that he held his breath.
They were lakes of mercury on Mercury, each averaging more than 1,000 square kilometers in area.
Zhuang Yu imagined standing on the shore of a Mercury lake during Mercury's long day, in heat of 1,800 degrees Celsius. Even in a gale, a Mercury lake would be very calm, and Mercury had no atmosphere, no wind. The lake's surface would be a vast mirror plane, reflecting the sun and the Milky Way without distortion.
The eternal flame emperor would continue approaching the sun after flying past Mercury, all the way to the closest distance that its heat insulation layer, supported by fusion cooling devices, could endure. The sun's heat would be its best cover. No NATO spacecraft could fly into that scorching hell.
Looking at this vast universe, and then thinking of the war on the mother planet 100 million kilometers away, Zhuang Yu once again lamented the narrowness of humanity's vision. Chapter 8. The Perfectly Beautiful Flower of Life. January 10th. Langfang Front.
Watching the enemy skirmish line gradually approach, Lin Yun understood why, after the surrounding jamming points had been destroyed one after another, only hers had survived. The enemy wanted to capture an intact flood unit. This helicopter group of 3 Comanches and 4 Black Hawks
had easily located the flood unit. Because of flood's enormous electromagnetic emissions, remote control could only be carried through optical cable. That in turn allowed the enemy to follow the cable and discover Lin Yun's remote control station 3,000 meters from the flood.
Unit. It was an isolated, abandoned storehouse. The 4 Black Hawks,
carrying more than 40 enemy infantry, landed less than 200 meters from the storehouse. At the time, besides Lin Yun, a captain and a staff sergeant were in the remote control station. The staff sergeant had just heard the engine noise and pulled open the storehouse door when a sniper's bullet from a helicopter lifted off his skull. The enemy's subsequent fire was cautious and restrained, clearly because they feared damaging the equipment inside that they wanted. That allowed Lin Yun and the captain to hold out a little longer.
Now to Lin Yun's left front. The sound of the captain's submachine gun had fallen silent. That gunfire had been her only comfort. She saw behind the tree stump used as cover that the captain's body was motionless, and a ring of crimson blood was spreading over the snow around him. Lin Yun was behind a simple barricade of several sandbags in front of the storehouse. 8 submachine gun magazines lay scattered at her feet. The hot barrel hissed in the snow piled on top of the sandbags. Every time Lin Yun fired, the enemy opposite dropped prone, bullets splashing clumps of snow in front of them, while enemies on the other side of the semicircular encirclement sprang up and advanced a short distance at a run.
Now Lin Yun had only 3 magazines left. She began firing single shots. That inexperienced action was the same as telling the enemy she was short of ammunition, and they advanced faster and more boldly. When Lin Yun changed magazines again, she heard a sharp squeak from the thick snow atop the sandbags. Something bored through it at high speed. She felt something shove her hard in the right ribs. There was no pain, only a spreading numbness. She felt warm blood flowing down the right side of her body. She held on and fired the magazine almost without aiming.
When she reached for the last magazine on top of the sandbags, a bullet smashed her forearm. The magazine fell into the snow and the arm, connected only by a strip of skin, swung back and forth. Lin Yun stood, turned, and walked toward the storehouse door, leaving a thin trail of blood in the snow behind her. When she pulled the door open, another bullet pierced her left shoulder.
The small detachment of U.S. Marine SEAL.
Commandos led by Captain Rhett Donaldson approached the storehouse cautiously. When Donaldson and 2 Marines stepped over the body of the Chinese sergeant and kicked open the door into the hut, they found only a young female officer inside. She sat beside their target, the Flood.
Remote control unit. One broken arm hung weakly over the control console. Facing her reflection in the display screen, she used her other hand to arrange her hair. Blood, dripping continuously beneath her feet, had gathered into a small puddle. She smiled at the Americans who had rushed in, and at the row of gun muzzles, as if in greeting. Donaldson breathed out in relief, but never drew that breath back in. He saw her hair-arranging hand pick up a dark green, elongated object from the control unit and hold it suspended in the air. Donaldson immediately recognized it as a fuel-air explosive bomb. Because it was equipped for attack helicopters, it was very small.
The thing used a laser proximity fuse. At half a meter above the ground, it would detonate twice. The first blast, dispersing the aerosol explosive. The second, igniting the explosive cloud. At this moment, even if he were an arrow, he could not fly out of its lethal radius.
He stretched one hand toward her and pressed it downward. "Calm down, Major. Calm down. Do not get excited." He signaled around him, and the Marine's gun muzzles lowered.
"Listen to me. Things are not as serious as you think. You will receive the best medical care. You will be sent to the best hospital in Okinawa, and then you will be among the first prisoners of war exchanged." The Major smiled at him again, which encouraged him somewhat.
There is absolutely no need for you to use such a savage method. This is a civilized war. It was originally going to go smoothly. I felt that a few days ago during the landing. Most of the shore fire had been destroyed, and only scattered machine gun fire decorated our glorious and romantic expedition exactly as it should. You see, everything can go smoothly. There is no need.
I know of another, even more beautiful landing.
The Major spoke in pure English. Her gentle voice seemed to come from heaven and could soften steel.
A beautiful beach with palm trees and welcome banners hanging from them. Pretty girls everywhere, their hair hanging to their waists, wearing silk trousers that rustled as they moved among the young soldiers, adorning them with red and pink garlands and smiling shyly at the stunned men. "Captain, do you know this landing?"
Donaldson shook his head in confusion. It was 9 o'clock on the morning of March 8, 1965, in Da Nang. The first U.S. Marines landed on Vietnamese soil. It was also the beginning of the Vietnam War.
Donaldson felt as if he had suddenly fallen into an ice cellar. His calm vanished in an instant. His breathing grew rapid, and his voice began to tremble. "No, do not do this, Major. It is not fair to treat us this way. We have not killed many people. The killing was done by them."
He pointed to the helicopters hovering outside the window.
"Those pilots and those gentlemen on distant aircraft carriers who operate computers to guide cruise missiles. But they are decent gentlemen too. The targets they face are beautiful colored markers on screens. They press a button or move a mouse, wait patiently for a while, and those markers disappear. They are civilized gentlemen. They have no malice, truly no malice. Are you listening to me?
The Major smiled and nodded. Who said the god of death was ugly and frightening? Death was so beautiful. I have a girlfriend. She studies at the University of Maryland. She is as beautiful as you, truly. She even joined anti-war demonstrations. I should have listened to her, Donaldson thought.
Are you listening to me? Say something too. Please say something. The beautiful Major smiled at the enemy for the last time. Captain, I am fulfilling my duty. A unit from 3rd Division C Group Army, rushing to reinforce the position, was still half a kilometer from the flood.
Remote control station when they first heard a muffled explosion and saw the lonely storehouse in the broad field vanish into a cloud of white vapor. Immediately after came a roar 100 times louder. The earth shook. A huge fireball appeared where the storehouse had stood. Flame wrapped in black smoke rose high and became a towering mushroom cloud, like a perfectly beautiful flower of life blooming between heaven and earth.
Chapter 9. A War Song from Ancient Times. January 11th. General Staff Headquarters of the Chinese People's Liberation Army. This is your assault plan.
Number 10 pointed at the operational concept map on the large screen and spoke angrily to the commander of the Northwest Group Army. It was the greatest anger anyone had seen from him since the war began.
Attacking north from the Baoding line merely strengthens Beijing's defense. It does not deal a fatal blow to the enemy on the southern line. You came from so far away and spent so much time assembling just to wipe someone's backside and scratch an itch.
We would also like to attack along the Angxin-Baxian line, past Tianjin, and strike the enemy's rear landing area. But that plan can no longer achieve operational surprise. Even Western news reports are now talking at length about this optimal direction of attack. The U.S. 82nd Airborne Division encircling Tianjin, a British armored brigade, and a Japanese Self-Defense Force regiment have already moved toward Baxian to block us.
That little strength can form at most a 10-kilometer blocking front. You can go around it. Even if you attack head-on, you have absolute superiority.
I am worried about time. The enemy's defense line, built at Kongzhou, is supported by long-range fire from the sea. If we cannot break through it quickly, the already difficult Langfang defense line will collapse. NATO forces may outflank Beijing from both sides and link up with the Russian army on the northern line. Then our North China and Northwest groups will no longer be able to form a pincer against the enemy on the southern line.
I know what you want. Stop wasting words. Ask for it.
Number 10 said it with a wave of his hand. I want the battlefield. Electromagnetic conditions of the last 2 days to continue for 4 more days. You know clearly that 70% of our battlefield jamming units have now been destroyed. I cannot give you 4 hours, let alone 4 days.
The High Command finally decided to attack according to the second plan. On the way out of the underground operations room, the Northwest Group Commander silently repeated in his heart, "Langfang, hold on, January 12, Langfang Defense Line.
The commander of 2nd Division, a group army, knew that their position could withstand at most one more attack.
Enemy air strikes and long-range strikes from the sea were gradually becoming fiercer, while our air cover grew scarcer. The division had almost no armor or attack helicopters left. This last defense now depended almost entirely on flesh and blood.
The division commander, dragging a leg cut off by shrapnel and using a rifle as a crutch, walked out of the bunker. He saw that the trenches were not dug deep. That was understandable. Most of the people on the position were wounded now. But he was astonished to find that in front of the trench, an orderly breastwork about half a meter high had been built. He wondered what material had been used to build it so quickly. He saw several things like branches protruding from the snow-covered wall. Drawing closer, he saw that they were pale, stiff arms. He flew into a rage and grabbed a colonel regimental commander by the collar.
Bastard! Who allowed you to build cover out of soldiers' bodies? I ordered it. The political commissar's voice sounded calmly behind the division commander. We entered the new position too quickly last night, and this is farmland. There truly was no other material.
They looked silently at each other. Blood from the bandage on the commissar's forehead had frozen in streaks down his face. After a while, the two of them slowly walked along the trench, along this breastwork built from youth and life. The division commander's left hand leaned on the rifle serving as a crutch, while his right hand straightened his helmet. He saluted the wall. They were conducting their final inspection of their troops. They passed a young soldier whose legs had been blown off. Blood from the broken legs had mixed the snow and soil beneath him into red-black mud, whose surface had now frozen. He was lying there, putting an anti-tank grenade into his arms. Lifting his bloodless face, he smiled at the division commander.
I am going to shove this thing into an Abrams track. The cold wind rolled up curtains of snow mist and let out a mournful howl, as if playing a war song from ancient times.
Commissar, if I am killed before you, please build me into this wall too. It truly is a good resting place.
The division commander said it.
The two of us will not be far apart.
The commissar said it with his characteristic calm. Chapter 10. The Beautiful Prominence. January 12, General Staff Headquarters of the Chinese People's Liberation Army.
A staff officer came to tell Number 10 that the Minister of the Aerospace Industry urgently wanted to see him. The matter was extremely urgent and concerned Zhuang Yu and electronic warfare.
Hearing his son's name, Number 10's heart shook. He had already learned of Lin Yun's death, and he could not imagine what connection Zhuang Yu, 100 million kilometers away, could have with electronic warfare. He could hardly even imagine what connection Zhuang Yu now had with Earth.
The minister and his party entered. Without saying much, he handed Number 10 a 3-inch optical disc.
General, this is a message we received 1 hour ago from Zhuang Yu aboard the Eternal Flame Emperor. Later, he added that this was not a private message, and he hoped you would play it in front of all relevant personnel.
Everyone in the operations room listened to the voice from 100 million kilometers away. Dad, from the war news I have received, I have learned that if electromagnetic jamming cannot continue for another 3 to 4 days, we may lose this war. If this is true, I can give you that time.
In the past, you always thought the stars I studied were too far removed from reality. I thought the same myself. Now it seems we were both wrong. I remember telling you that although the energy produced by a star is enormous, the star itself is a relatively pure and simple system. Take our Sun, for example. It is composed of only the two simplest elements, hydrogen and helium. Its operation is also composed of only two mechanisms, nuclear fusion and gravitational balance. Therefore, compared with our Earth, its operating state is easier to grasp in mathematical models. Today, solar research has already built very precise mathematical models of the Sun, and some of that work is mine.
Through this mathematical model, we can make very precise predictions of the Sun's behavior. That allows us to use a tiny disturbance to locally break a certain equilibrium in the Sun's operation within a short time. The method is simple. Use the eternal flame emperor to strike a precisely calculated point on the Sun's surface.
Dad, perhaps you think this is merely throwing a small stone into the ocean. But it is not. It is a grain of sand falling into an eye.
From the mathematical model, we know that the Sun is an extremely delicate and sensitive energy balance system. If calculated properly, a tiny disturbance can create a chain reaction on the solar surface and to a considerable depth. As the reaction spreads, it breaks a local equilibrium.
There are historical precedents. The most recent record was in early August 1972, when a violent eruption occurred in a very small region on the Sun's surface. That eruption caused an electromagnetic storm that had a tremendous effect on Earth. Compass needles on aircraft and ships jumped wildly. Long-distance radio communications were interrupted. Dazzling red light flickered in the night sky over the Arctic, and in villages, electric lights brightened and dimmed as if in the center of a thunderstorm. The effect lasted more than a week. A relatively credible explanation today is that at the time, a celestial body, smaller than the eternal flame emperor, struck the solar surface.
Such disturbances of solar surface equilibrium must have happened many times in history, but most occurred before humanity invented radio receivers, so they were not noticed. Those impacts on the solar surface were random and accidental, so the equilibrium disturbances they produced were limited in both strength and range.
But the impact point for the eternal flame emperor on the Sun has been precisely calculated. The disturbance it creates will be several orders of magnitude greater than the natural disturbances mentioned above. This disturbance will make the Sun erupt powerful electromagnetic radiation into space, including electromagnetic waves across all bands from extremely low frequency to very high frequency. At the same time, intense X-rays emitted by the Sun will violently strike the ionosphere, which is crucial for shortwave communications, changing its properties and interrupting communications. When the disturbance occurs, most wireless communications on Earth's surface, except millimeter wave, will be interrupted. The effect may be relatively weaker at night, but during the day, it will even exceed the electromagnetic jamming you conducted over the last 2 days.
According to calculations, this disturbance can last about a week.
Dad, in the past, The two of us always lived in two worlds far apart, and we rarely communicated. But now our two worlds have merged into one. We are fighting for a common goal. I am proud of that. Dad, like every one of your soldiers, I am waiting for your order, the aerospace minister said.
Everything Dr. Zhuang has said is true. Last year, we launched a probe toward the sun. Following calculations from the mathematical model, it conducted a small impact test on the solar surface, confirming the disturbance predicted by the model. Dr. Zhuang and his research group also proposed an idea. Perhaps in the future, this method could be used to adjust Earth's climate appropriately.
Number 10 entered a small side room and picked up a red telephone directly connected to the nation's highest leader. Before long, he came out. Historical accounts of this moment differ. Some say he immediately spoke the sentence. Others say he remained silent for as long as a minute, but the sentence itself is certain.
Tell Zhuangyu to do as he said. January 12. Near solar orbit.
The eternal flame emperor
rushes toward the sun. All 10 fusion engines of the eternal flame emperor were running. From the nozzle of each engine shot a plasma jet more than 100 kilometers long as it made its final orbital and attitude corrections.
Ahead of the eternal flame emperor
lay a giant and beautiful prominence. It was a stream of blazing hydrogen gas spiraling up from the solar surface, like a long veil floating above the sea of solar fire, changing shape and posture as if in a dream. Both its ends were connected to the solar surface, forming an enormous arch.
The eternal flame emperor passed slowly and solemnly through the center of this triumphal arch, 400,000 kilometers high. Several more prominences appeared ahead. They were connected to the sun at only one end, while the other reached into deep space, with its engines glowing blue. The eternal flame emperor was like a tiny firefly moving among several great trees of flame. Later, the blue light gradually went out. The engines stopped.
The eternal flame emperor's
orbit had been set precisely. Everything remaining would be completed by the law of universal gravitation.
When the spacecraft entered the sun's upper atmosphere, the corona, the black background of space above, changed to purplish red. That purple-red glow filled all the space here. Below, the scene in the solar chromosphere could be seen clearly. There, thousands upon thousands of spicules glittered. These things had been observed by astronomers in the 19th century. They were luminous jets of gas shooting from the solar surface into high altitude, making the solar atmosphere look like a burning prairie, every blade of grass more than 1,000 kilometers long. Beneath this burning prairie was the photosphere, an endless ocean of fire.
From the eternal flame emperor.
The last images sent back showed Zhuangyu rising from before the giant monitor screen and pressing a button to open the protective shield outside the transparent dome. The magnificent ocean of fire appeared before him. He wanted to see with his own eyes the world of his childhood dreams. The sea of fire trembled and distorted, because the half-meter-thick insulating glass was melting. Soon the glass wall, more than 100 meters high, became a sheet of transparent liquid and rolled down. Like a person seeing the ocean for the first time and facing the sea wind in rapture, Zhuangyu opened his arms to welcome the 6,000-degree hurricane roaring toward him.
In the final seconds of images sent back before the cameras and transmission equipment melted, people could see Zhuangyu's body catch fire. Finally, his whole body became a leaping torch, merging with the sun sea of fire. What happened next can only be imagined. The eternal flame emperors.
Solar panels and protruding structures would melt first. Because of surface tension, those melted parts would form small silver spheres on the spacecraft's surface. When the eternal flame emperor
crossed the boundary between the chromosphere and the corona, its main body began to melt. After it plunged 2,000 kilometers into the chromosphere, the entire body had fully melted. Separate droplets of liquid metal merged into one huge silver sphere, flying at high speed along the precise target path set by the computer that had itself become liquid. The effect of the solar atmosphere began to show. Around the liquid sphere appeared a ring of pale blue flame. The flame trailed hundreds of kilometers behind it, changing from pale blue to yellow, and at the tail into a beautiful orange-red. Finally, this beautiful fire phoenix vanished into the boundless sea of fire.
January 13th. Earth. Humanity returned to the world before Marconi. After nightfall, even in equatorial regions, the night sky was filled with surging aurorae. Facing television screens full of snow, most people could only guess and imagine what was happening on that continent locked in fierce battle.
January 13th. Tanggu Front. General Parker pushed away the commander of the 82nd Airborne Division and several frontline commanders who were trying to pull him onto a helicopter. He raised his binoculars and continued looking into the distance where the Chinese line was rolling forward.
Set range 4,000 meters. Load ammunition number 9. Delay fuse. Fire. From the sound of firing behind him, Parker knew there were fewer than 30 105mm howitzers still able to fire. They were the only heavy weapons he currently had for defense.
1 hour earlier, the only armored force on this position, a tank battalion of the Japanese Self-Defense Forces, had launched a countercharge with admirable courage and achieved excellent results. 8 kilometers from here, they had destroyed Chinese tanks equal to 1.5 times their own number. But because of their absolute numerical inferiority, they vanished before the Chinese steel torrent like dew under the noon sun. Only one Japanese tank, dragging black smoke and flame, returned to the front of the position. A young lieutenant colonel climbed out of the tank. He removed his tank helmet, knelt facing east, pulled open his burned clothes to expose his abdomen, then drew a paratrooper knife and wiped it with a white handkerchief, glancing toward the position as he did so.
The Americans on the position watched him with cold but interested eyes. He held the paratrooper knife upside down with both hands and shouted. But in the last 1/10 of a second, cowardice came over him, and the knife stabbed into the snow. He took out a pistol and fired into his mouth. Then he lay struggling in the snow, drawing a strange pattern on the white surface with brain matter and blood. Finally, he thrust a hand into the snow, grasped Chinese soil, and died.
Set range 3,500 meters. Fire.
After the shell's flight shriek, a high wall of earth and flame rose before the Chinese tank line. But it was like a landslide before a flood. The collapsed earth blocked the flood for a moment, and then the flood came over it. After the earth thrown up by the explosions fell back,
The Chinese armored spearhead emerged again in the heavy smoke. Parker saw that their formation was extremely dense, as if they were on parade. A few days earlier, attacking in such a formation would have meant suicide. But now, when NATO's air and long-range strike firepower were almost completely paralyzed, it was a usable formation. It could concentrate armored assault power to the maximum and ensure a breakthrough at one point in the line. The mistake in deploying the beachhead circular defense line had been within General Parker's expectations, because under battlefield electromagnetic conditions like these, it was almost impossible to determine the enemy's main attack direction accurately and quickly. As for the next stage of defense, his mind was blank.
Set range 3,000 meters. Fire, General. Were you looking for me?
Lieutenant General Josquer, the French commander, walked over. Only a French lieutenant colonel and a helicopter pilot accompanied him. He was not wearing camouflage. The ribbons on his chest and the stars on his shoulders were polished bright. But he wore a helmet and carried a rifle, making him look oddly mismatched.
I hear that on our left flank, the Fawn Division is withdrawing from its position. Yes, General Josquer, behind us 700,000 NATO troops are boarding ships. This beachhead withdrawal is 3 times the scale of Dunkirk. Its success depends on our firm defense.
It depends on your firm defense. May I have a clearer explanation? You understand everything. You concealed the real battle situation from us. You knew long ago that Russia would declare a unilateral ceasefire on the northern line.
As Supreme Commander of the NATO Expeditionary Force, I have the authority to do that. General, I think you also understand that you and your troops have the duty to accept command. Set range 2,500 meters. Fire. I obey only the orders of the President of the French Republic.
I do not believe you can receive such an order now. I received it months ago at the National Day reception at the Élysée Palace. The President personally explained to me how French forces were to act under such circumstances. You Gaullist bastards, you have not changed in decades.
Parker finally lost control. Do not put it so unpleasantly, General. If you do not leave, I will remain alone too. We can die gloriously together on this eastern land. Josquer said this while waving the French standard FAMAS rifle in his hand at Parker. Set range 2,000 meters. Fire.
Parker slowly turned to face the group of frontline commanders before him.
Please convey the following words to the American troops holding the position. We were not born an army that can fight only by relying on computers. Like the enemy before us, we too come from an army of farmers. Decades ago on Guadalcanal, we fought the Japanese for one foxhole after another in the tropical jungle. At Chipyong-ni in Korea, we knocked aside Chinese grenades with shovels. Farther back on that cold winter night, the great Washington led soldiers without shoes across the frozen Delaware at Trenton and made history.
Set range 1,500 meters. Fire. I order all documents and non-combat supplies destroyed. Set range 1,200 meters. Fire.
General Parker put on a helmet and body armor.
and tucked his 9mm pistol under his left arm. At that moment, the howitzer fire fell silent. The gun crews were stuffing hand grenades into the gun barrels. Then came a burst of disorderly explosions. All soldiers.
General Parker looked at the Chinese tank group that had opened out before them like a barrier of death, and said, "Fix bayonets." Behind the battlefield smoke, the sun appeared and vanished, casting shifting light and shadow across the bloody snowfield.
Note 1. A brief explanation of these electronic warfare terms follows. Frequency hopping. The transmitter and receiver change frequency according to the same sequence. Direct sequence spread spectrum spreads signal energy across a very wide band, making interception and jamming difficult. Null steering adaptive antenna, an antenna with a coverage pattern like a kidney shape, with the null pointed toward the enemy jammer to which the antenna does not respond, so it can communicate with friendly antennas in other directions. Burst transmission sends information either for a short time using a wide band or for a long time using a very narrow band. Frequency agility automatically changes frequency when jammed.
Note 2. In 1966, General de Gaulle withdrew France from NATO's integrated military command structure, a serious blow to NATO during the Cold War. The end.